Welcome to A Growing Concern. The last couple of weeks we've been covering a lot of the anti-war events that have been going on since the first of the year. The trial of Lieutenant Wattada just happened this last week. We covered the die-in and some different things that were going on in town in resistance to this war. We're going to cover a different subject tonight. It's something genetic engineering. And at first thought you might think, well, what does that have to do with the war in Iraq and anti-war and all that? Because we tend to try to cover that issue as it's unfolding. But the face of imperialism is there's a lot more than one face of imperialism. Let's put it that way. And colonizing takes place in just more than another country when the military goes in and takes over. There's a colonization of our food supply going on in this country and all over the world as well. And perhaps that is even more insidious and pervasive than the military actions, which are really obvious when that is going on. This has been taking place for some time throughout the world, genetic engineering and the move to co-opt the world's food supply and make it something owned by corporations. And but people don't know about it. Other parts of the world, like Japan, England, Germany, these countries have openly defied the use of genetic engineered and what they call genetically modified organisms in their foodstuffs. And the United States is way behind on that. There's not a whole lot of resistance against that mainly because the media refuses to really tell us what's going on. But we're going to talk a little bit about this tonight. We have some guests here that are going to explore what is going on. One is a speaker named Anuradha Mittal, who is here to speak tomorrow night at the First Unitarian Church. We'll put that up as we go through the show on the myths of genetic engineering and the new green revolution for the world's poor. And we're going to discuss those issues tonight as well on this program and prime you for her presentation tomorrow night. But I welcome you both to the show, Anuradha Mittal, and we also have Mark Desmaret, who's with the local group Northwest RAGE, Resistance Against Genetic Engineering. And it's such a large subject, I don't know where to start, so we'll just begin with Anuradha, and welcome to Portland, and welcome to the show. Have you been in Portland before?
Briefly, very briefly.
Very briefly? Well, it's a nice town.
I think so too. I'm really excited I'll get to spend some time here.
It's a lot different than Oakland, where you're from, or where you're living right now, right? You have something called the Oakland Institute there. So.
That's correct.
What exactly does the Oakland Institute do? We'll do a little background on you yourself before we get into these issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, Oakland Institute is a progressive policy think tank. We are working to ensure public participation, fair debate on social, economic, environmental policy issues. So to ensure that there's a real democratic debate around issues that affect our lives.
Understand. And Northwest RAGE is it's a great name, I must say.
Yes, it's effective. It grabs people's attention.
Mm-hmm. And how long has Northwest RAGE been working?
We started Northwest RAGE in the spring of 1999 and been active since then, educating the public. We got Trader Joe's to go GE-free, 100% GE-free, and a couple other campaigns that we're working on currently is the Bentgrass campaign, which we just had a significant legal victory over, and biofuels, which is a big thing going on in the country and the world actually right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know when you've been on the program in the past, we have talked about the myth of genetic engineering, and we're going to go over that now, and I'll just open that up with Anuradha. What are some of the myths of genetic engineering? A lot of people think, it feeds the world's poor. I mean, is that really what's going on?
Well, actually, if you go to some of the corporations that are involved in this technology, corporations such as Monsanto, you go to their website, it's very interesting. You would think that they suddenly have become the good doers. It's all about wanting to feed the world, to challenge increasing hunger and poverty, to benefit farmers, to do good to the environment. And it's also very interesting that they have resorted to what we call at the Institute greenwashing, that this technology is going to be very helpful for the environment, we'll be using less pesticides, though after 9 years of and more of growing genetically engineered crops in the US, evidence is in that more pesticides, more herbicides are being used in this country. And the second one is poor washing. Showing images of starving children in Africa, in Asia, and how this technology will suddenly be a silver bullet solution to hunger. And that is poor washing because it is a spurious suggestion that you can solve the problem of hunger through a technological fix. Our research, even FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, admits that right now we have enough food to provide more than 2,720 kilocalories per person per day around the world. It is enough to make us fat. So the reason you have hunger is because of the absence of living wage jobs, is because of inequities, such as in Brazil, where 1% of the population controls more than 50% of the land. So we have to look at policy solutions. We have to focus on small farmers and their livelihoods rather than thinking some corporation can come up with a technological fix to the problem like hunger. Or else we wouldn't have hunger in the richest nation on earth, in the United States.
Well, I know that when Ralph Nader was in town a few years ago, I was astounded by some of his statistics about infant mortality and hunger in this country.
Yeah, according to USDA, you have right now more than 37 million Americans who are identified as going to bed hungry or they're food insecure. So when you look at those figures, you know, if it was just a solution lies in technology, we would not have hunger in this country. So that is one of the biggest myths that needs to be challenged. And then we have to look at the real rationale as to why corporations have been so keen to promote this technology without going through environmental review, without looking at the impact on public health, and more important, the impact on livelihoods of farmers.
Mm-hmm. You know, what you were saying, I know that we've talked about this in the past. People would think, well, the FDA or whatever, don't they check this stuff? Aren't they out there being an agency for the people?
You would expect.
You would
and
expect.
That's what most Americans expect. And you know, it's what happened in Europe, where the citizens there didn't really believe their regulatory system, with all good reason. But in the U.S., for whatever reason, we still continue to believe that our government does no wrong, that all these regulatory agencies are continuing to regulate the food supply in this situation and not putting out a product that might harm us. But in fact, the approval process is basically a rubber stamp. There's only been 2 environmental impact statements ever produced for genetically engineered crops. One was the first crop ever produced, the flavor saver tomato. And the second one is actually here in Oregon. It's not finished yet, but it's the genetically engineered creeping bentgrass. So only 2 actual cases in the United States where the government has actually done a, quote, full environmental review on the environmental effects and the health effects on humans. And in fact, there's very, very few peer-reviewed studies around the world on the effects of eating genetically engineered foods on humans. Mm-hmm. And you would, again, so people, you know, think that our government is actually, you know, regulating the food supply and making sure that it's safe, when in fact these products are basically, the companies are basically notifying these agencies that they're about to do these field trials or they're about to bring these products out to market. And the regulatory system says, if you say it's good, then we say it's good.
Mm-hmm. Well, Anuradha, since what you were saying that it isn't going to help the world's poor, that it is that technology is maybe what is standing in the way rather than what is helping. How is it that the Americans don't have this viewpoint?
Well, you know, the saddest thing is, I think Americans are, I would say, the largest supplier of guinea pigs for the corporations as they are moved ahead with this technology. If you look at more than 60%, right, Mark, of our food in the market shelves of our supermarkets already has genetically modified organisms in it. And as Mark pointed out, there has been no review process. Our regulatory agencies have been fast asleep at the wheel. There have been some horrific incidents where food not meant for human consumption did get mixed with our food supply, whether it was starling corn in year 2000, which led to a recall of over 300 or 500 corn-based products. Last year, we had genetically engineered rice, which was not meant for human consumption. It was found in our food supply. And around the world, actually, if you look, most of the countries have some kind of regulation, some kind of laws or comprehensive regulations around this technology. Whether it is Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, most of the EU members, Poland, Bulgaria, India, even China, and even Saudi Arabia. But United States, the beacon of democracy, is failing its own people. So it is one of the biggest experiments that's ongoing. And as Mark pointed out, these foods are not labeled. There's no way to determine health impact. But several independent peer-reviewed scientific studies are beginning to show that there's all kind of concern just as public who is consuming these foods. They're going right inside us. Our children are eating this food. We should be outraged. We should be out in the streets. We should be demanding a government right now to be moving in favor of people's health, our environmental interests, and more important, our farmers. What's happening to the farmers?
Well, I think that perhaps this country is not so much a beacon of democracy as a beacon of corporate capitalism, and there seems to be some kind of breakdown between the two. A lot of people equate the two, democracy and capitalism, but it doesn't seem to work out that way. And I know that you mentioned 37 million people are going to bed hungry here, and that's over 10% of the country.
Well, I said it's the beacon of democracy because I feel it is not the government that passes the certificate on the level of democracy. When I see the grassroots movements right here in Portland, when I look at Northwest Rage, I mean, this is citizens taking charge of their destiny and their food supply. We are based in California, working very closely with Californians for GE-free agriculture. So just as in the Philippines or in France or India, where farmers are saying no to GE crops, there is this groundswell of grassroots movement in the United States which is saying no to these foods. In fact, a recent poll shows that 90% of Americans want their food labeled. And over 60% of them say that they would reject these foods if they're labeled. And that is why the industry will not allow labeling, will not allow environmental reviews, because they know they have products and technology that is not good for us.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was talking with Mark about this the other day when they tried to get something passed to where they would label it. And 75% of the people were for it when it began. And what did you say? It was $6 million spent?
Yeah, CropLife International and Monsanto, of course, brought in $5.5–6 million to the campaign against the labeling bill in Oregon. And at the start, it was 65% of the citizens wanted to vote yes for it and 35% no. And with that $5.5 million, 3 different advertising or TV ads on TV running constantly, those numbers flipped.
Well, that shows, goes to show how powerful the television and the news media is.
And how much the industry wants to keep us in the dark from what is actually in our food supply.
Well, since that you, from what I understand, this is a main issue of the Oakland Institute that you're dealing with, but it isn't just genetic engineering. I mean, we've talked about this before, but there's the whole thought of what was it? Environmental racism. That it is the poor people of the world that are the ones that are this is being foisted upon.
Well, I think in this case they're using the images of poor people, hungry people, to get countries in Europe to agree to these products, or to challenge resistance within the United States that if you say no to this technology, you're keeping populations in the third world hungry. But it's very interesting. It was in 2000 when Zambia refused a shipment of genetically modified food aid from the United States. Tony Hall, U.S. representative to the United Nations on food and agricultural issues, was outraged. He talked about how the Zambian government should be brought before the International Criminal Court, forgetting that U.S. does not believe in the criminal court, International Criminal Court, for starving its own people. And the groups such as Friends of the Earth, Greenpeace International, and others were criticized for being fat, well-fed Europeans who want to take away the right of Africans to be fed. Their basic argument being that beggars cannot be choosers. But the government of Zambia stood strong, said no to GE food aid. It got non-GE food aid from other countries, China, India, Kenya. They all offered the country non-GE food aid. And despite all these accusations that people would starve, nobody starved to death in Zambia. And in fact, next year, World Food Program spent millions of dollars buying food from Zambia for distribution as food aid in the region. So basically, this whole thing of urgency that we need this technology or we'll all starve, or this is the only solution to deal with hunger, is nothing else but a PR strategy on which millions of dollars are being spent, as Mark said, whether in the United States or in the third world countries. But it is really about corporations like Monsanto wanting to take ownership of seeds because they are the ones who are selling these seeds. And then these seeds require their Roundup, their herbicides. So it is a grand scheme of increasing their profits by using images of starving children overseas.
And creating a dependency on that technology as well, like with the Terminator seeds.
Oh, definitely. Thankfully, Terminator technology is right now not up for commercial usage, though they would like that very much.
Also, I know we've talked about this before. That the terminology or the Terminator seed isn't going forward then.
Well, basically, due to worldwide public outcry against it, the companies have put the applications for commercialization on hold. They're still doing testing in their laboratories, and they're still applying for patents. Since Monsanto said that they weren't going to commercialize it, they themselves have gotten numerous more patents on new techniques for Terminator, as well as Syngenta and Bayer and all these other companies as well. So they're ready as soon as they can convince the public that it's okay, or maybe not even the public.
Or the agencies.
The agencies, exactly. As soon as, like Monsanto just got caught a couple years ago bribing Indonesian officials.
I remember that.
And there's all sorts of other cases. If someone were to really do some really hardcore investigations on these companies, I'm sure there's a lot of other places in the world where they're doing the same thing, conceivably even in the U.S. as well.
Mm-hmm. Mark, I don't know if some of the viewers who might not have watched the earlier program, you might want to just say what Terminator technology is.
Yeah. So Terminator is a technology where the companies are creating a plant, a genetically engineered plant, that produces seed, but that seed is infertile through whatever technique they've done to make it. So that seed, if you were to replant it, wouldn't grow. And in fact, they've gone beyond Terminator to what we're now calling Trader technology, which is a whole nother step. Basically, the Trader tech is almost a way for the biotech companies to save even more money, or to make even more money, where they'll sell you the seed and it will have the gene turned off for reproduction, and it will have all these other traits stacked into it. And so if you want to save your seed from that crop, well, you buy a proprietary chemical from Monsanto, apply it at the right time, and then you can save seed and grow it again. Of course, you're having to pay these technology use fees for each crop, and then all these different chemicals. So thankfully, the people around the world have said this is absolutely insane. Farmers, since agriculture began, that's how you reproduce your crops, and have uprisen against it and said absolutely not. It's insane.
According to your studies, has there been a whole lot of outcry in this country against this sort of thing, or is this the rest of the world protecting us?
Definitely. I mean, on one hand, especially around Terminator technology, and as you said, for centuries, farmers have saved their own seeds. It's something that especially women farmers have been involved in. And it has gone on for centuries. So the right of Monsanto to say that we will give you a seed which will not produce a seed for the next year. I mean, over 1 billion farmers in the world even today save seeds to plant it for the next crop. So to take away that right is the most outrageous thing that you can do. And it is also very interesting because these are the same companies who are saying that they're coming up with technologies to benefit the farmers. But here you are making them dependent and putting them on the treadmill of even having to buy seeds each year. So on one hand, you have resistance around the world. Just last November, I was in India where I was meeting some of the largest farmers' unions in my country, Bharat Krishak Samaj, Bharat Kisan Union, and they represent nearly 700 million farmers in my country. So they are big. Yeah. And they were burning field trials of GM crops in Haryana, Punjab, which are considered the granaries of India. And they were like, we do not want this technology. And now the Oakland Institute is based in California, where citizens have passed and have worked, despite all the money being poured in by the industry, to pass regulations and ordinances which have declared their counties to be GM-free, whether it is Mendocino, whether it is Marin. They have come together to say that there's going to be no production of genetically modified crops or animals. So it is very heartening to see that despite all the money the industry has, we as people still really have the power.
Mm-hmm. That is especially true in countries that have such, like you would just say, 700 million farmers or something like that. So you don't have the large agricultural farming like PHARMING like they have in this country. Is that mostly like in America, or is this large scale industrial farming going on in other parts of the world as well?
Well, I think the world is beginning to wake up to what has happened to farming in the United States. I mean, in 1920s, nearly 30% of the population in the United States was in agriculture. And today, less than 2% of the population remains in agriculture. I mean, you have more people behind bars than behind the wheel of a tractor in this country. Mm-hmm. Average age of a farmer in this country is 55 years or older. Labor Census Bureau says that the largest job loss between 98 and 2008 will be in the field of agriculture. And it is not surprising given less than 14% of a farming household income comes from farming. The rest comes from getting a job at the local Walmart or the local gas station. So the rest of the world is beginning to rise up to the fact that this industrial agricultural model, which is being exported to the rest of the world, has resulted in the death of farmers. You know, we hear about farmer suicides in India, but we don't realize that the number one cause of death among farmers in the United States is suicide. The rates of shame, alcoholism are huge. So given that the world is rising up and saying we need to stop and look at our food system, do we want to go down the way United States has, or do we want to take back our food system? Because food is very personal. It goes right inside us, and yet it's very political.
You know, now that you mentioned the word political, a lot of this has been established worldwide through free trade policies. You know, like NAFTA and GATT and you know, the latest FTAA and all those that they I think they export not only the ability to have money and capital crossing the borders, but they also stop labor from doing the same thing. And in your experience, is this how you've seen that the free trade is the mechanism that uses this a lot?
Well, I think right now what corporations would like to see, corporations like Monsanto, Cargill, ADM, and the others, they would love to convert all of us into consumers. And I always kind of hesitate when I use the word consumer because I think of consumption, tuberculosis, or fire that consumes. So they would like to change this whole relationship that we have in a community with a food system. And yes, the impact of free trade agreements has been devastating. So we talked about, or I mentioned what's happened to the farmers in this country, but you look at NAFTA you mentioned. I mean, Mexico has grown corn for over 10,000 years. And with lowering or removal of tariffs under NAFTA, suddenly cheap subsidized corn from United States was dumped into Mexico. You know, nearly 2 million farmers have been displaced from their land in Mexico since NAFTA was adopted in the 90s. You have a situation where exports of corn from US to Mexico have tripled, while the Mexican farmers have gone out of business. And then we talk about immigration in this country.
Just what I was going to say. Right?
You know, you're talking about the cheap farm workers who are coming into this country to find slavery or xenophobic legislators and xenophobic immigration laws. These are people who used to be small peasants, campesinos, you know, who are working their land and living with dignity.
And sustainable too, where they weren't creating a problem with the environment like these big corporate farms do.
Oh, they're the best stewards of the land.
And they always have been so. So, Mark, you, I really appreciate that you were able to bring Anuradha to town and to bring her on the show. These are issues and the things that I don't think people really understand, you know, and like we've talked about in the past, that America, it's a great way of putting it, guinea pigs, because they don't realize what's going on. And what has been your experience? Because you've been out at Safeway, you've been out at Trader Joe's, you've done educational protests. How do people respond?
We've been to every single grocery store in Portland, basically.
Oh, good.
Our experience is that when we get out there and we educate the public, and we do these nonviolent, very, you know, to some degree low-key, lots of signs and maybe some costumes and handouts and whatnot. When we go to these grocery stores, or we go to these churches, or we go, you know, wherever we are tabling, and people take the time, and many people do take the time to come and talk to us, every single one of them is outraged that you're telling me the government didn't study this and didn't test it and didn't make sure that it was safe before they allowed it on the market. And so when we educate the public is not stupid. They just haven't heard this stuff because of the media control and the amount of money that, that CropLife and Monsanto's bring into these campaigns to obfuscate the issue and muddy the waters. But when we educate the public, they're absolutely outraged. And like Anuradha was saying, in this latest poll, 90% of the people want it labeled, and 60% of that 90% want it labeled so they can make a choice at the market shelf
to say
no.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's overwhelming that so many people would be against something like this, and these
And
corporations.
it still happens.
And it still happens. But you say that the group that you're with, the Oakland Institute, is a think tank. What have they come up with as far as I've heard that Monsanto, some of the things that they've done as far as stopping books, stopping articles, is that pretty common in the genetic engineering industry, where they completely can control and by threatening reporters and all that? Is that a common occurrence?
Well, definitely there's a tradition among
Legacy.
corporations to try to, stifle real democracy and public opinion, and for people to have all the information. I tend to focus on, despite everything that they have and the kind of resources they have, the kind of money they're putting in, and the kind of threats they're able to impose on people, it is just amazingly beautiful and wonderful to see how this grassroots movement is growing all over the world, including the United States. And in fact, what these corporations don't realize is that these attempts of thwarting real discussion and debate is actually antagonizing the people. So the question is not just about being against the technology. The question is really about people wanting to have a discussion on who controls the technology, who owns it, how it is used, and what's the impact of it. So I would just hope that these corporations would learn, and that they would have good PR people and strategists who would tell them that their efforts to mute opposition is actually working against them.
Mm-hmm. It's only working for them in the short run.
Yeah, but in the long run, it's not.
Well, the people do get incensed. I mean, whatever that Japanese general said after they bombed Pearl Harbor, we think we've woke a sleeping giant.
Right.
Well, the population is the same. They are, in this country at least, they're a sleeping giant. In other countries, I have great respect for the efforts and what is being done in other countries. I know India itself, it has been the target of an incredible amount of abuse by corporations. I've heard or read, I think it was Vandana Shiva, when she was in town, talked about how they've had food that they've been harvesting for 5,000 years or so, and all of a sudden a corporation comes in and they patented it. Mm-hmm. This has been going on in more than one place.
And it is causing new awareness among people. I mean, their patents on the neem tree, the patents on basmati, the trademark, they have been challenged. So in some ways, if these corporations think that they can get away, people are far more wiser, and we are beginning to see that in experience. And as I said before, what Northwest Rage is doing, individuals who have come together, and as people get informed, they're rising up to the occasion. Mm-hmm. Over 51 countries today have regulations, comprehensive regulations around genetically engineered foods. So US is becoming more and more isolated. So it's a matter of time. And if you look at the food sector, the largest growing sector in the food economy is the organic sector. You look at community-supported agriculture and farmers markets, they're burgeoning. So it is the impact of these moves by the corporations to take over a food system that people are standing up and demanding food sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Because as I said, food is very personal, it's very political, it's very important for us. It's not a luxury item that we can make a choice about. This is something which is absolutely essential for our survival. It is about a human right to healthy, safe, nutritious food.
And as you say, it's a very burgeoning organic foods, but you go into Fred Meyer's now, and they have the sections that have organic foods. There used to be like 3 tomatoes, mm-hmm. and now it's just one whole section of it. And that's probably somewhat in part because activists are out there pushing hard for this.
Absolutely, yeah. And these corporations, with the 1980 case of General Electric in the Supreme Court, which actually allowed literally the first patent on living organisms. And what people don't realize, there's already over 3,000 patents on human genes. There's, who knows, tens of thousands of patents on plants and other individual genes in those plants. These corporations eventually are going to try and patent every single living organism on this earth. There is no end to this system, because if you look at the ecosystems and how this planet works, every single gene and every single plant has a use, and these corporations will try and figure out a way to make money off of that. If they could patent oxygen or sunlight, they would. And you know, one thing I tell people is this technology is a solution in search of a problem. We never needed genetic engineering to begin with. We never needed biotechnology. For every reason that the industry gives us for requiring this technology or needing this technology, either we already have an example that's been working for 10,000 years or 5,000 years, sustainable agriculture is one example, or we could go and do some research. I mean, imagine the money that has already gone into these products. It took $1 billion to bring the first GE product to market, the Flavor Saver tomato. Lasted on the market for 2 months because it tasted horrible. And it was $1 billion that they wasted. You know, let's put that. In the last Farm Bill, we got $25 million for sustainable agriculture research.
25 million?
Yeah.
Which is a huge increase, actually, from the previous Farm Bill. But that's not enough, you know. And we are very smart people on this planet. And we need to look at we need to begin even more to look at ways to live sustainably, or as close to sustainable as we can. Because we do live on a finite planet. There are finite resources. We're very amazing people, and we do have the abilities to make this planet where there are no hungry people. I mean, it's an outrage at anybody on this planet. You know, environmental justice, social justice, any issue you want to talk about, that anybody on this planet goes hungry.
You know, a couple of things you both have mentioned kind of click together. You mentioned that they've patented like, what, 3,000 or whatever the term?
Human genes.
Human genes. And then you said something about that the folks in India have challenged this. It makes me wonder about the structure. I mean, the folks in India challenged these foodstuffs that they've had all these centuries from being patented, and you mentioned that these things have been patented. Now, does each country have its own patent system, or you know that is something I'm curious about the structure of that.
There are several patent offices. So in fact, it is a huge, big issue, and I think one of the biggest campaigns that the international community has to say is there can be no patents on life. I think it is a very spiritual question. It's a huge legal question. For me, whether you're, you know, whatever faith you believe in, you know, Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism or Muslim, I think it's a question for each one of us. Either life was created or it was invented, and we need to deal with it. And I think we all believe that life cannot be, invented, and therefore there can be no patents on life. But in case of India, like I mentioned, we have fought a patent in the U.S. Patent Office. Millions of dollars were spent on it, you know, for a country like India, which could have spent those resources on different kind of programs, health budgets, education budgets for our children. And as soon as we had won, we find a similar patent has been filed in the Australian Patent Office. So this is basically, as you said, we need to recognize in the United States, nearly 80% of the food that is eaten, the germplasm of that came from the third world. We can be grateful, we can acknowledge this gift from nature, from the environment, which has been passed on from one generation to another, which has been shared, that we cannot colonize it, as when you started the program you said. It needs to be recognized. So this new colonization, where the new armies are of scientists who are going off to different parts of the world, to the third world, to patent the germplasm, and to tell the people who have taken care of it and nurtured it for centuries that now you have to pay for us to grow it, to eat it, is the colonization of our times that we have to fight back. It's the new form of slavery that has to be fought back.
It's to me, it's just ironic that comes mainly through a country who was founded on, certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I mean, what are your genes if not your life? And here it is. They just flip that around, and that they're going right to the basis of it. Yeah. And I saw something called Gene Hunters a few years ago, and doctors were going into South America and patented people's genes. Is this what you were speaking about there?
Yeah. And that stuff is continuing. It's a whole other issue with the human stuff. There's only about 22,000 genes in the human genome. Already 3,000 of those are patented and owned by somebody. And we're actually, if you want to look at it kind of in their reductionist ideology, humans are slightly less complex gene-wise, or definitely much less complex gene-wise, than say a Douglas fir tree, which has 200,000 genes in it.
I had no idea.
It's not really the right way to look at things, but that's what the reductionist ideology that this industry, that this technology is using, is that every single gene is basically like a screw or a nut or a bolt in a real machine, and that we can insert things, we can take them out, we can move them around, and we'll just make these products. We'll make these plants do what we want them to do. And there are some laws out there. One is, the law of nature, and we don't even know what the laws of nature are fully yet. But we do know that salmon and tomatoes can't mate, and they usually cannot exchange their own genetic codes. And that's what's happening with these laboratories. And so, and the industry fully understands that this technology will fail. The Bt cotton is failing. The bollworm is becoming resistant to the Bt. The Roundup ready crops are creating super weeds out there that are also resistant to the Roundup, having huge problems. There's the mare's tail weed that grows 12 feet tall in two or 3 months, and it is now resistant to Roundup because of the massive amounts that the farmers are applying to these fields now because they have these Roundup ready crops. So they're constantly putting this herbicide out there and basically creating a resistance in these weeds. Same with the Bt, the Bt pesticide. Talk to any entomologist. If you were to put a pesticide out in the environment 365 days a year, that insect population in a very short time, which is conceivably a life cycle that's much faster than the corn, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, whatever, is going to become resistant. And those that are going to survive are the ones that are resistant, and then we'll have this super pest that basically negates the technology that they inserted into this plant. And the industry knows that this system is going to fail, but they're making the fast buck now until the system collapses.
It would seem to me that I've done a lot of work in forest advocacy, as has Mark, and it just seems to me that this reductionist, that's a good way to put it, because it seems to me that this reflex, this mechanism of looking at the world and conducting themselves towards the world, like you're saying, looks at the world like we don't need all this biodiversity,
right?
And what there is, they're trying to patent it. And eventually, it seemed to me, I mean, if you found this to be the case, that this move into the green revolution and all that, has it reduced the biodiversity of the plants and animals? Probably mostly plants and smaller animals, insects in the area. And has it had effects?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it is like 2/3 of our agricultural biodiversity has been lost in the last 90 years. That's huge. And it's really, as Mark pointed out, about this short-term, quick, make interest kind of philosophy of corporations. They don't care. So it is about, I don't care, whatever I can do to sell more and more Roundup. Never mind, it really is creating a crop that you can pour on as much Roundup as you want without killing the crop, and you might be consuming that. I mean, not might be, but you are consuming that Roundup ready soy.
Or somebody is anyway.
Yeah, well, somebody is who's not watching out. So you have that situation. And at the same time, as you pointed out, they know this technology has failed. Bt cotton, I mean, I just wanted to quickly address that. Monsanto's website has this press release which talks about the success of Bt cotton. It has a quote by a widowed mother of two, a biotech cotton grower in India, who's saying her life has improved because her income has gone up thanks to Bt cotton. Now in India, even the government of India has acknowledged that Bt cotton has failed. In the entire, a certain brand of Monsanto Bt cotton, MEC 112, had to be banned all over southern India. The governments who are asking in Andhra Pradesh for compensation from Monsanto because of the loss to the farmers. Last November, when I was in India, as I mentioned before, I traveled to Vidarbha, which is the cotton belt. And there I met families who have seen their husbands or their fathers or brothers consume pesticide and kill themselves because they spent so much money buying Bt cotton seeds. And then they found they had to spend more money because, as you pointed out, bollworm had become, is not responding to the insecticide, so they have to buy more. So they basically have taken on huge big loans. These crops have been devastated. So here is the audacity of the company to talk about success of Bt cotton when farmers, when the government, when the Genetic Engineering Approval Committee of the federal government is saying Bt cotton has failed. Or Cornell University did a study last year of Chinese farmers who were the first ones to start growing Bt cotton. And the study found that after 7 years, the profits of farmers had gone down. In fact, they were earning almost 8% less than the farmers who were growing conventional cotton. So the evidence is in, and yet Monsanto and others can lie to us and say this is the best thing they've ever done for the farmers.
Mm-hmm. Didn't that also happen with growing the rice with the Green Revolution, where the first year they had more crops and more money, but it got down to where it was a fraction of the original crop?
Well,
So
definitely.
this isn't new.
It isn't new. You know, those chemicals, they work for a while and then the production has gone down, the loss of topsoil, the insects become resistant to insecticides. But because we were talking about genetic engineering, one of the big things, and people might have read, you know, this Times and Newsweek article which talked about vitamin A rice, which is supposed to be one of the big miracles of genetic engineering, which would solve the problem of vitamin A deficiency among children, especially in Asia. Now, first of all, millions and millions of dollars were spent on this rice.
In the research?
In the research. And the product that was created, first of all, you would have to consume, an average male would have to consume 19 pounds of that rice per day to be able to make up for the deficiency. Now, that is humanly impossible. But the biggest thing is that people who are doing that research don't realize that people who have vitamin A deficiency have also other deficiencies, and that is because they're malnutrition, because they're too poor to put 2 decent meals on their table. So how will they afford these genetically engineered meals? And more important, while all this money has been spent on this research, a country like India already has red rice, Bhutan has red rice, Sri Lanka has red rice, which is very rich in vitamin A. Or you ensure that people eat fish or green leafy vegetables, they're great sources of vitamin A. So the solutions exist, but by putting focus on GE crops, they are diverting our attention from 2 causes of malnutrition and hunger.
Like you were saying.
Perfect solution in search of a problem.
Right, exactly what it was.
We already have rice with vitamin A in it. So.
Exactly.
And it would be a
Much
whole
less
lot
that's
easier
all.
to give people multiple vitamins than to spend billions of dollars on technologically producing a product that it doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
Exactly.
Well, I think we're down to about 15 minutes of the program left. If Anuradha and Mark would like to maybe answer some questions or some comments, we'll open up the phones. Gives us 15 minutes or so. We'll continue with the conversation. Hopefully folks out there might have some questions. It's a large issue, but it's not a real complicated issue when you get right down to it, when the people are being shucked. And you know, the myths of genetic engineering and the new green revolution for the world's poor. That is the title of a talk that Anuradha is going to be giving tomorrow night. We almost forgot to even mention that. We're getting into the nuts and bolts of this issue. But Mark, you want to tell us where that's taking place? I think we even have a graphic for it. We can put that up as well.
Yeah, this is just another aspect of our educational component that we do as activists with Northwest Rage. And this will take place at 1011 Southwest 12th Avenue, 12th and Main, downtown at the Unitarian Church. Doors open at 5 p.m. and the talk begins at 6.
Right. The talk's at 6, and you'll speak for an hour or so and have Q&A possibly afterwards, something like that?
Oh, definitely. Everyone's hoping and looking forward to a discussion.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of folks in this town that, there we go, we got a phone call, and there's the graphic about it up there, though. So we'll get the first caller on the air. Caller,
Hello.
you're on the air.
Hello.
Hello.
I am very interested in this topic, and I'm so pleased to see you addressing this. I wonder if there's anyone tracking the health concerns, aside from just the obvious diabetes and how we are becoming ill through our food supply. But I will tell you my personal story. In 2005, I have a disease that compromises my immune system, an autoimmune disease. But in 2005, it got so bad that my gastrointestinal tract just shut down and was stuck on go, basically. And I went from 150 pounds to 96 pounds. My vascular system was being destroyed. I was having all kinds of blood problems that was causing strokes and other areas of blockages. Now, I went to 10 different doctors, neurologists, gastroenterologists, rheumatologists. Finally gave up on them at 96 pounds and found a naturopath. Started looking at my diet. went totally organic. And then I thought maybe I had a gluten intolerance, and so I went off all gluten. So I got real careful at reading the labels. The minute I stopped eating anything that might contain genetically modified food like, corn syrup, soy product, and what's the other one, canola oil, within 6 months, I am up to 112 pounds and on the mend. I spent a year and a half in bed. I am up now for like 12 hours a day, which is a big deal. And I am on disability right now. This has destroyed my body, and I really believe this food, not only the economics of it, not only are we continuing to starve our population of the world, the food that we're giving the population is killing us.
Well, I appreciate that comment and that testimony.
Well, I hope that someone's tracking the health concerns and what this is doing to our bodies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And
Anecdotal stories, I think, sometimes have the most powerful. We can talk about, all the studies and all this in the world, but there's a woman right there, and I've talked to someone just recently that was taking some kind of a steroid for some reason, and her life was falling apart, and they kept giving her more and more of it, and she stopped taking it. She got well.
Well, it's proof that you are what you eat.
Mm-hmm.
And Socrates said, your food is your medicine is your food. And unfortunately, there aren't enough people doing any research on the actual health effects. And because the entire country of the U.S. is a huge test population, it would be very hard in many ways to actually find a base population that didn't consume any genetically engineered crops. Samuel Epstein is a good researcher, and he's doing a lot on BGH, bovine growth hormone. So that's one good study, or one scientist that somebody could look into, at least on the milk issue and the dairy issue.
Mm-hmm.
But there's really very few studies out there. The universities are now being funded by the biotech industry, so they are clamping down on any research that looks bad on them. Governments aren't doing it. Our government certainly isn't doing it.
Mm-hmm.
You would have to go to another country, I would think, wouldn't you, to be able to get that type of control for your studies?
I mean, on one hand, it's very true, and it's also true that, very often if you send your letter or, challenging FDA or USDA, they'll say, these products have gone through rigorous testing. That's the word they use, rigorous testing. What this rigorous testing involves is basically voluntary research which is done by the companies themselves, and they submit the data. It is not even mandatory. It is voluntarily done. So Monsanto's saying, my product is safe. It has gone through these studies. And in fact, less than 1% of the total biotech budget of USDA goes to doing any kind of risk assessment. So less than 1% of their total budget is being devoted to that. Having said that, there are studies. There's a Scottish study that was done which looked at rats that were fed GE potatoes and non-GE potatoes, and it showed that the rats that were fed GE potatoes had all kind of gastrointestinal problems. There's a study that was done by a 24-month-long study done in Italy, which also showed that there was all kind of cell structure changes and other things that took place in mice and in the liver and pancreas, which were fed Roundup Ready soya compared to the mice that were not. So there are several independent peer-reviewed scientific studies which have taken place around the world, and that's why more and more countries are adopting regulations, some of them being very comprehensive around GE foods. And again, I don't think there could be any more critical time than for us to get engaged in demanding safe, healthy, nutritious food in the United States.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, and hopefully we'll move that. I see we've got some more phone calls. We'll get the next caller on the air. Next caller.
Hello?
Hello, you're on the air.
Great. Can you tell me what's going on with the genetically engineered grass here in Oregon, please?
Custom made.
Custom made. So what happened in 2001 is there was a field trial, 421-acre field trial, huge field trial.
In Central Oregon.
In Madras, of genetically engineered creeping bentgrass. And what happened is they had an 11,000-acre containment zone. Of course, containment is just a word when you're out in the environment.
Well, considering the wind and the pollination and all
Well,
that,
if you
right?
know Eastern Oregon, it's
Yeah.
windy. So they did this field trial, 421 acres, and indeed this plant, which is not yet labeled as a noxious weed, but is probably very close to being labeled as a noxious weed, is a weed in many areas, and the Forest Service and the BLM came out against it, the field trial itself. And so they planted this field trial. Well, it was windy, and the pollen blew and the seeds blew. And as far as the folks who had done this field trial, they put out test plants 12 miles, 13 miles away, and those were contaminated, genetically polluted.
12 or
with
13
the
miles
pollen.
away.
Well, and the issue with that is that's as far away as they had actually done any research. So the wind, blows and blows and blows, so it conceivably went 50 miles, but as far as they studied was only 13 miles. And so that grass was basically designed for golf courses. Another, solution in search of a problem. We don't, and it's Roundup ready, so they're going to ideally use it to be able to spray these golf courses and save money on the weeding issue there. And what just happened, Center for Food Safety did a lawsuit against Monsanto, Scotts and the USDA, and they just won. And this is actually a landmark decision where the judge said that the field trial itself was illegal, never should have happened without environmental review and including an environmental impact statement, possibly. They're now doing an environmental impact statement because of this contamination event that happened. And the judge said that all new field trials have to go through, or basically enjoined or stopped, until our regulatory system finally does what they're supposed to have done this whole time and look at the issues surrounding genetically engineered crops. Now, in the situation in Oregon, I don't even know why they did this study here, this field trial here, because this is the grass seed capital of the world. In the Willamette Valley, it's $350 million industry. It's the third largest agricultural economy in Oregon. And we've heard from farmers in the Willamette Valley, grass seed farmers, that contamination has actually already made it to the west side of the Cascades. Of course, Monsanto and Scotts have not offered to clean up their mess, and they've been forced to do a little bit of work on that, but they certainly haven't tested any of the seed supply here, and they're not owning up to that, much less have they actually even taken back their application to commercialize this product. Hopefully with this case that just happened in the media that's surrounding it, we'll get them to stop this absolutely useless product that nobody needs and nobody asked for to begin with, and which conceivably has already contaminated our grass seed industry, which would severely impact our farmers. Japan has already said that they wouldn't buy our seed if it's contaminated. Europe wouldn't buy it. All sorts of other countries wouldn't be buying our grass seed, which is a huge agricultural product here.
I think we've got other phone calls. We'll get the next caller up on the air. Caller? Hello, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello?
Yes, first of all, thanks for having these great guests. It's a great show. I'm really enjoying it. I have two questions.
Sure.
First, you mentioned Trader Joe's had come on board for agreeing not to stock GEs. How about the other local stores that maybe like New Seasons and some of the smaller stores that purportedly carry organic products and a lot of soy products? How are you there? And secondly, how effective is the labeling? Are we guaranteed that with cross-pollination and everything, if something is labeled that it's not genetically engineered, that in fact that's the case?
Well, so we had a campaign against Trader Joe's with a coalition around the country called the GE Free Markets Coalition. And that campaign, after about a year and a half, convinced Trader Joe's to remove all genetically engineered ingredients, reformulate many of their products to get all genetically engineered ingredients out of there. They are, to this day, the only grocery store chain in the country that is 100% genetically engineered free. And that's because, and we had this campaign against them because most of the products that they sell are their own brand. So the issue locally, Wild Oats and Whole Foods have also pledged to not use genetically engineered ingredients in their store brand products.
Right.
The other stuff on the shelves, if it contains any derivative of corn, cotton, soybeans, and canola, and it's not 100% certified organic, it probably contains some genetically engineered organisms. And the issue with organic, especially when it comes to corn, soybeans not so much because they don't cross-pollinate as well as other stuff, but corn and canola, which does readily cross-pollinate, the farmers, the organic farmers, are required to have the entire process of their production organic. There could be what they're calling adventitious contamination from a neighboring cornfield or a neighboring canola field that might actually contaminate that organic product. But the process, the standards in organic production, you can't use anything genetically engineered, and you have to do everything in your willpower or your power to make sure that the system is clean. There could be some contamination.
Mm-hmm. I think we're down to about 3 minutes. We have one caller. We'll take the last call. Caller, you're on the air. You got to have about a minute, though, unfortunately. I apologize for that. We're running out of time here. Hello, next caller.
Yes, hi. My question was along the same lines as the last caller, because I've been asking Trader Joe's for years if they were GE-free, and they assured me every time I asked them that they were. Are there any other stores in the area that I could go to, and how much of Trader Joe's are they free of genetically engineered food now or not? And I'll take my answer out the air.
All right, thank you for the call.
Yeah, so as far as we know, there was some issue with some dairy at Trader Joe's that may or may not have been, but as far as we know, the latest information from them, 100% GE-free in everything that has their store brand name on it. Mm-hmm. And other stores, of course, in the area, all the co-ops, of course, the farmers markets. I'd suggest everybody start a little mini revolution in their backyard and dig up some soil and plant something in it. Get away from those cardboard tomatoes at Safeway, and promote and support sustainable agriculture. And as an organization, we hold 2 different seed swaps per year, one in spring and one in fall. Anybody can come to those. We offer seeds that I grow, other activist members grow, and then the entire community comes together. We show a video. It's not very political, but a short video on the issues. And then we have a GE-free potluck, and then we share seeds, something that farmers have done for 12,000 years.
Sure.
So, being proactive is definitely the way to go, and especially in Portland, of course, there's a lot of areas and a lot of places that you can go to shop and not have genetically engineered products.
With these phone calls, a phrase came to mind, think globally, act locally. Right. We've been bringing these issues forward, and folks call up and they're concerned about their food supply locally. Right. And that is important. I think that is a perfect reaction. We're down to less than a minute, so I want to make sure that folks, if they've tuned in late, Anuradha Mittal, will be at the First Unitarian Church tomorrow night. We may be able to have some time to throw that up real quick. If not, just remember, tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. I see we got the credits up now, so we probably won't be able to, but the First Unitarian Church tomorrow night, that's the Saturday night, the 10th. Anuradha Mittal will be there to be speaking about these issues that we've talked about tonight, and you'll have a chance for questions and answers there if you weren't able to get through on the phones tonight, because we only got 2 lines and they get jammed up pretty fast sometimes. So I want to thank the guests, Anuradha Mittal and Mark Des Marets. You brought some important information here, and people care about where their food comes from. They may not know it yet.
As evidenced by the question.
Right. But hopefully we'll talk more about this in the future. Good night for now. Thanks for tuning in.